Just to preface this video, it has nothing to do with the video, but there are birds circulating and everything, singing. You might hear it. Um, when you think that life isn't fair, or when you think that certain things about life aren't fair, let me first dive into this by exploring pattern repetition. Repetition compulsion. I believe that it was Freud that first coined this, the act of repeating patterns compulsively from childhood, right? What's wild to me, I've read enough books and I've learned enough to know that what's wild to me is how much of a fucking byproduct we are of the people that raise us, our environment, our friends, teachers, partners, everything, right? And what's fascinating is that if you do the work to individuate and differentiate and actually separate yourself from everybody else, right, you'll have a better chance at being able to form what I would consider to be a much more conscious personality, right? How you think, how you feel, and how you act. It's fascinating because I remember I used to get caught up on this idea of, you know, bad weather, right? Like, oh, the weather's bad, right? It's just raining. It doesn't make it good or bad. It does influence how you experience it, and you can look at it however you want to, and that's okay, right? There is something else that I've believed throughout my life, not consistently, but in different situations and experiences, and specifically in at least one relationship. Um, no names, of course, but it's fascinating how much you can believe that something is unfair, even though you have consistent proof, meaning signs, right? Like, for instance, like, it's not like you're never going to know that you're sick if you are sick, right? There are symptoms that you're sick. If you have a cold, you probably have a sore throat and a runny nose. Maybe you have a headache, right? The same thing is true for situations, events, relationships in life. You might think that an event that happened is not fair. You might think that a job that you lost is not fair. You might think a relationship that you lost is not fair, right? But like getting sick, like having any sort of sickness, I mean, maybe there are some illnesses that go off radar somehow, and there are no signs and symptoms of it, right? I'm really not going to get into that, but what I am going to get into is that if you believe that life isn't fair, and there were clearly fair fucking warnings that something was going to go south, that whatever it is that happened to you was going to happen, then life is not really unfair. You just avoided the fucking signs. You just let those fucking red flags go right the fuck over your head. Right? That's just the reality of it. And so I really used to believe that things weren't fair, that things aren't fair. Right? Actually, something happened recently. I'm not going to talk about the logistics, anything about it, no names, nothing. But I remember saying, this isn't fair, right? I was just not accurate about that at all. It was 100% fair because for a long period of time before that event, there were multiple signs and symptoms of, you know, collapse, of undesirable outcomes. And that's just the reality of it, right? And so, if there are signs and symptoms, which there usually are, I would argue 90 to 99% of the time, right? I don't really know when there wouldn't be signs that something is going to go south, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some instances out there where some things just get fucking crazy and for whatever reason it's over, you know? But even like things getting crazy is a sign, right? And then something happening before that, and then something happening before that, and something happening before that. If you really think that life is unfair, you can think that all you want to. Life will continue to look unfair because you're projecting this belief out into the world that life is unfair. And that's just the way that it is, right? And so you will continue to experience life as unfair because you're projecting this belief that you think that life is unfair. Do you feel stuck? I feel stuck. I feel stuck. You're creating that. You're projecting that, right? And so you're continuing to remain stuck. And that's just the reality of it. So, you know, it's fascinating because I really used to believe that life was unfair. And even, let me go a step even further, get a little bit deeper and darker, right? Trauma is challenging to deal with, right? I learned a lot as a result of my trauma. It hurts that I was traumatized, but I learned a lot. Back then, life was happening to me, and then I realized it happened for me, and now it's happening through me. See that transition? That transition is important to understand. And so, you can believe that life is unfair all you want to. It's very likely that you're only believing that because you are, I guess, it's kind of hard to say this, but unconsciously or subconsciously choosing that, which is kind of challenging because it's like, well, if it's unconscious or subconscious, then it's not really in the light. So is that really even something that I'm choosing? Again, sleepwalking, pattern repetition, autopilot, living the same fucking way every single day with the same thoughts, feelings, and behaviors about everything. There is information out there that you can transform your life with. There is material out there that you can learn that will help you see signs of potential collapse, or not just potential collapse. You can learn so much that it will actually transform your idea of things being unfair in life to actually instead being proactive and being like, oh, there's a motherfucking red flag. Oh, there's a motherfucking red flag. Yeah, I'm out of here. I'm not going to stick around for this shit show and watch this avalanche of hell fall upon me. Right? I mean, you can see the red flags, you can see the signs and still choose to do fucking nothing because maybe you're comfortable. I don't know. Right? I have been there. I have. I've literally sat there and been like, wow, this is. I mean, I used to think that things that were really unhealthy were normal. So I used to be like, nope, this is fine. Everything around me is on fire, but this is fine. It's not. It's really not. And if you ignore that, things will get worse. And that's just the reality of it. So there are two parts to this, I would argue. One, getting as conscious as you possibly fucking can. Growing and evolving beyond repetition compulsion because we are all just repeating patterns from childhood. In every sense of the word, how you see things, how you see people. That's just the reality of it, right? Instead of choosing to get pissed because you think that something is unfair, learn to see the signs. Learn to read the signs and actually take action. I'm saying this from experience. I really am. I've seen the signs and I've just been hyped up on a hopium game of maybe it'll change. I'll stick around. Maybe it'll change. It doesn't. It doesn't. Unless somebody is really fucking ready to change, it does not change. It does not. I'm not here to instill any ideas of hope for anybody. It does not fucking change. If you communicate dislike in regards to somebody's behavior and they do it again, they're not going to change. That's just the reality of it. They're not interested in changing. Changing is something that is outside of their radar. That's the reality of it, right? And so, not only that, but also if you see life as unfair, right? Learn about signs, about how to read the potential collapse, the potential rise of things, right? Because information is out there. You can learn how to read signs. You can learn to see red flags, right? And you can stop validating red flags as yellow flags and try to turn them into green flags. No, red flags are motherfucking red flags. That's that, first and foremost. But just like how you believe that bad weather, right? When it rains, when it this, that, and the other, or, oh, the weather's so crappy, you know? It's the same thing in thinking that life is unfair. Somebody taught you to believe that life is unfair. And so, therefore, you project this idea out onto the world and believe that life is unfair. Well, guess what it's going to do to you? It's going to mirror back to you your belief. And it's going to bring you event. Well, okay, you believe that life is unfair, so here. Here is unfair. Oh, you believe that life is unfair too. Okay, well, here is unfair. Oh, actually, you know what? Instead, I've learned a lot. I believe that life is fair. Oh, cool. Here's fair. Oh, really cool. Here's fair. That's just the way that it works. Life is, I mean, the fascinating thing too. Let me just go a little bit into black or white thinking, right? Because I just realized this has to do with that somewhat. Maybe I'm not totally accurate about this, but fair, unfair. It's either fair or it's unfair, right? Maybe life is actually really neither. Maybe it's more so just about enjoying your experiences of life, being able to learn about signs and symptoms that arise from things that are unhealthy dynamics, and that's just the way that it is, and being able to judge that and move accordingly, right? If you see a red flag, if it's that big of a red flag, get out, right? I mean, to step outside of black or white thinking, I don't really believe that life is unfair. I think that there are, I used to, but I'm healing and evolving. I used to. But now I'm seeing it's like, oh, well, no, it's really not unfair. Everything was presented to you, and that's just the reality of it. Your capacity to see it is what changes your experience of life.